Hey guys, tonight we're mixing up something fizzier than your group chat after someone says, "Hey, can I ask a dumb question?" Because tonight we're diving into a bedtime history so wild, so carbonated. You'll question reality and maybe your next beverage choice. That's right. Tonight we're talking about Fanta, the Nazi soft drink. Yes, that Fanta. The orange soda that tastes like childhood, summer, and questionable decisions at the movie theater was literally invented because of World War II, Nazi Germany, and a total embargo on Coca-Cola. Let that bubble around in your brain while you get comfy. Before we get started, go ahead and tap that like button, maybe subscribe, and, hey, only if you actually enjoy this, drop a comment about your favorite soda, or tell me where you're listening from. Now dim those lights, put on a fan for that gentle, maybe I'm in a submarine background hum, and find a cozy spot. Tuck yourself in like you're hiding from both Allied bombers and the existential dread of a world without caffeine. But let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what wartime thirst feels like? How do you invent a soda when your country is cut off from sugar, caffeine, and frankly, moral high ground? Did German executives really just throw fruit scraps into a vat and call it a business plan? What would happen to your favorite snacks if tomorrow you could only use what's already in your kitchen? Are you ready for turnip cola? Why did Coca-Cola even have a factory in Nazi Germany in the first place? Could you survive a day as a German beverage manager, rationing orange peels and praying the Gestapo doesn't notice you're out of saccharin? Would you risk everything just to keep your workforce hydrated, even if it means inventing something called Fanta? Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1942. The world is at war. You're in Nazi Germany, in an office that smells like desperation, cold cigarettes, and faint citrus. And you, my friend, are about to create the weirdest soda in history. It's 1941, and you are not living your best life. The world is on fire, trade routes are cut, and Coca-Cola syrup has vanished like socks in a laundromat. You're the head of Coca-Cola's German division, and you've got a thirsty nation demanding something, anything, to drink that isn't just turnip juice or lukewarm despair. Let's set the scene. You wake up every morning to the echo of distant air raid sirens and the less than motivational smell of cabbage stew wafting up from the street. Your pillow is lumpy, your dreams are rationed, and your inbox, if such a thing existed, is overflowing with frantic memos from the Reich asking, "Why aren't you selling Coke?" And, "Have you tried using sawdust?" Spoiler. Yes, you have. And no, it doesn't fizz. You stumble into your office, a drab, drafty building somewhere in bombed-out Berlin, where the coffee tastes suspiciously like boiled disappointment. The Coca-Cola sign out front is sun-faded, and every time you look at it, you feel a pang of nostalgia for simpler times. When syrup shipments crossed the Atlantic, when your job was mostly just making sure the local bottlers didn't fall asleep in the storage room, and when nobody tried to nationalize your entire business for the cause. Those were the days. Now, your reality is a lot grimmer. The Nazi regime has cut Germany off from most of the world, including Atlanta, Georgia, home to the secret syrup, and the only people who truly know what's in Coca-Cola. You're not just out of sugar and caffeine. You're out of options. The last time you tried brewing cola concentrate out of boiled beets and hope, the janitor took one sip and quit on the spot. Every day, you face the same question. What do you serve a nation that wants to feel normal when normal left town 2 years ago with the last American supply ship? Your team, ragged, tired, and surviving on black bread and adrenaline, gathers for yet another emergency meeting. You review your resources. Apples, the cores and peels left over from cider factories. Whey, leftovers from the cheese plant down the road. Beet sugar? If you can pry it from the clenched fists of government quartermasters, sure. Everything else is either forbidden, extinct, or reserved for the High Command's secret schnapps stash. You begin to understand why medieval alchemists spent so much time alone. But people are still thirsty. And not just for propaganda. You watch as Berliners queue up at battered kiosks, clutching their ration cards and reminiscing about the taste of real Coke, a flavor that now exists only in stories and suspiciously rosy childhood memories. You try to picture what would actually refresh a person who spent the morning dodging falling masonry and the afternoon listening to a speech about sacrifice. Orange juice? There's no oranges. Grape soda? There's no grapes. Water? Even that's a gamble. This is where corporate creativity and desperation meet in a high-stakes game of what wouldn't kill us. You brainstorm with your remaining chemists, who look at you the way a dog looks at a thunderstorm. After hours of debate, you all reach a simple, slightly unhinged conclusion. You'll make a new soda from whatever you can scrounge, salvage, or politely steal. Call it upcycling. Call it culinary improvisation. Call it what you will. The alternative is insolvency and, if you're unlucky, a very stern lecture from a man with more medals than patience. You write a memo to your staff. New product. Use what we have. Make it taste not terrible. The optimism is contagious, mainly because it has to be. The war has changed everything. But the human need for a sweet, fizzy escape is stubbornly immune to rationing. And so, you begin the strange and surprisingly epic quest for soda under siege. The ingredients are odd, the process is improvised, and the stakes feel existential. But when the first batch comes out, pale, weird, a little tart but undeniably drinkable, you hand out samples, hold your breath, and watch as people smile for the first time in months. It's not Coca-Cola, it's not even close. But for a few precious minutes, it's enough. You've just invented Fanta, and you don't even know it yet. All you know is that sometimes survival tastes a little bit like citrus and a lot like relief. Welcome to the parched birth of a soda. Imagine shelves stripped bare of everything fun. Coffee is a memory. Sugar is rationed. And your job is to invent happiness in a bottle using whatever edible garbage is left behind in the supply chain. The pressure is enough to give you citrus-related nightmares. Let's walk through a grocery store in Nazi Germany, if you can even call it that. The bread section is half empty and made mostly of sawdust. The meat counter is optimistic at best and imaginary at worst. The candy aisle? Gone. Long gone. It's been replaced with thin hope and bitter disappointment. You're living in a country where even the idea of a treat feels luxurious, almost decadent. And here you are, tasked with the absurd challenge of making soda. Coca-Cola, as a brand, was immensely popular in Germany before the war. People loved it, truly loved it. It was American, yes, but it was also fizzy, sweet, and a reminder that joy once came in glass bottles. Now the war has snapped the supply chain like a dry twig. No more syrup from Atlanta. No more imported sugar. No more bottles, labels, or syrup secrets. You've got a factory. You've got employees. But you don't have Coke. You have a job to do, and absolutely no tools to do it. Worse still, people don't stop being thirsty just because the world is collapsing. They still crave a splash of sweetness to break the monotony of black bread and potato stew. But you're starting from scratch. Literally. You begin to eye your surroundings like a desperate forager. Can this root be sweetened? Can this peel be boiled? You find yourself sniffing beets, chewing dried apple cores, and whispering to yourself, would this fizz? Meanwhile, the German government isn't particularly invested in flavor. They're focused on war logistics, troop morale, and making sure you don't accidentally invent something that sounds vaguely American. The pressure is real. You're expected to produce results, but with zero ingredients and a growing sense of doom. It's like being asked to write a novel without ink, paper, or the ability to spell. You hold meetings with your surviving chemists and beverage developers, most of whom have already rebranded themselves as fluid resilience specialists to avoid conscription. They're not thrilled. The best idea on the table is turning leftover fruit pulp into a fermented, carbonated liquid. You nod, not because it's brilliant, but because it's not the worst idea you've heard this week. The worst was minted cabbage water. And let's talk about sugar, or the complete lack thereof. Sugar is rationed so tightly that it might as well be a myth. If you want some, you better be friends with a farmer, a pharmacist, or someone with black market connections and low standards. So, you pivot to saccharin, the pre-war world's go-to sugar substitute. It tastes like the distant memory of sweetness, filtered through regret. But it's legal, it's available, and it dissolves. So, victory? Even carbon dioxide isn't easy to come by. Bottling caps are hoarded like treasure, and you have to convince metal suppliers that your fizzy experiment is worth a few extra lids. Spoiler alert, it's not. You end up bartering finished product just to keep the supply line creaking along. You're now officially part of the soft drink black market, and your boss thinks this is innovation. But the people, those poor, thirsty people, are desperate. You bottle your strange new liquid, slap a label on it, if you have one, and distribute it to the kiosks that still have windows. It's not Coke. It's not good, but it bubbles, and when someone sips it, and their lips twitch into a smile, maybe just a small one, maybe just because it's cold, you feel something close to pride. Because in a nation stripped of joy, even a strange lukewarm soda made from leftovers can feel like hope. Meet Max Keith. If a spreadsheet ever became a person, it'd look a lot like Max. He's Coca-Cola's man in Germany, and he's got one mission: keep the factory running, keep people employed, and, ideally, don't get executed for capitalist subversion. Max is not the kind of man who dreams of soda. He dreams of order, of inventory tallies balanced to the decimal, of invoices filed by candlelight in triplicate. While the world collapses into chaos, Max is out here trying to maintain a beverage empire with the energy of a mid-level accountant trying to organize a train station during an earthquake. And yet, against all odds, he becomes the wartime Willy Wonka of Nazi Germany. His mornings begin early and grim. He smooths his hair with exactly 3 fingers of well water, buttons his jacket like it's armor, and makes his daily pilgrimage to the factory through a city that's slowly unraveling. Along the way, he sidesteps craters, salutes the occasional officer, and tries not to make eye contact with anyone who might ask him to join a committee. He is a man on a mission. That mission is, don't get arrested. At the plant, the air smells like scorched sugar and fear. His workforce is depleted. Many of his best technicians have been drafted or disappeared. The bottling line is held together with chewing gum, twine, and the sheer willpower of one guy named Otto, who hasn't slept since 1939. Max walks the factory floor with a clipboard and the haunted look of a man trying to calculate how many bottle caps are left before the Third Reich notices they're technically still selling American soda. To say Max is walking a tightrope is putting it lightly. On one hand, he represents Coca-Cola, a proud symbol of American capitalism and sugary bliss. On the other, he's deep in Nazi territory, playing by rules that change weekly and often involve suspicious paperwork and terrifying visits from uniformed men who don't like jokes. Somehow, Max manages to avoid becoming political while being surrounded by politics. He's Switzerland in a 3-piece suit. And yet, He keeps the factory running. Part of this is skill. Most of it is sheer, grinding bureaucracy. Max understands systems. He knows how to reroute shipments, how to fill out ration forms in the correct ink color, and how to convince local officials that bottling fruit pulp is, in fact, vital to the war effort. He's the king of plausible deniability and polite nodding. His motto is essentially, let's not cause a fuss. When the Coca-Cola syrup stops coming from America, Max doesn't panic. He calculates. He lists. He inventories. He doesn't yell. He doesn't cry. He sharpens a pencil, looks at a warehouse full of byproducts and food waste, and thinks, what if we made this drinkable? The man isn't a visionary. He's a spreadsheet with a pulse. But that's exactly what Germany needs. Max's genius isn't in flavor or flair, it's in logistics. He keeps his workers fed just enough. He avoids raids. He balances production against ruin like a man juggling flaming pineapples. And through it all, he never stops believing that keeping the plant open, producing anything, is better than shuttering it and admitting defeat. So when Fanta is finally born, cobbled together from fruit scraps and unregulated optimism, Max doesn't toast. He just files a report. Because for Max Keith, surviving the war with your workforce intact and your factory still standing isn't a miracle, it's just good management. And maybe that's why the soda survived too. Not because of wild innovation or brilliant taste, but because one man decided that even under dictatorship, in the middle of a world war, bureaucracy would endure. Max Keith didn't dream in color, but somehow he bottled it anyway. You peer into your ingredient warehouse. What's left? Apple pomace, beet sugar, whey from cheese production, and anything orange adjacent. Welcome to the world's first upcycled soft drink, invented by sheer necessity and a lack of international flavor options. It's a beverage experiment born from the same mindset as what if we put ketchup on stale bread and call it pizza? Only far worse. You walk the echoey aisles of the warehouse, past sacks of dried vegetable rinds and barrels of things that technically count as food, depending on your definition of edible. There's a subtle but persistent smell of something fruity, but also faintly dairy adjacent. You try not to think too hard about it. There are no oranges. Let's start there. You live in Germany. It's 1941. And any citrus that used to come in by boat is now either sunk at the bottom of the Atlantic or being hoarded by Nazi officers who believe vitamin C builds character. So you're stuck with what's available locally, and what's available locally is agricultural leftovers. Apple pomace becomes your best friend. It's the slushy mash left behind after pressing apples for cider. Basically fruit pulp, skin, and seeds with the charisma of wet mulch. But it smells vaguely sweet, and if you squint hard enough, you can imagine it used to be delicious. It's a start. Next, beet sugar. It's gritty, temperamental, and tastes like a compromise. But it's sugar adjacent, which is good enough. The real stuff is long gone, but you find enough beets being grown for industrial purposes that you can siphon off some of their sugary souls into your recipe. You feel like a medieval alchemist whispering just a pinch of misery into the cauldron. Then there's whey. Yes, the byproduct of cheese making. A thin, ghostly fluid that looks like it was rejected by yogurt for being too emotional. It's vaguely nutritious, mildly gross, and completely free because nobody else wants it. You stare into a barrel of whey and think, this is soda now. You've officially entered the culinary uncanny valley. Together, these ingredients form the holy trinity of wartime soda. Leftover apples, sad sugar, and cheese water. If that sounds disgusting, don't worry. You're going to carbonate it and serve it chilled. And if people complain, remind them it's this or broth made from boiled wallpaper. You get to work with the factory chemists. They're tired, underpaid, and deeply suspicious of everything you're asking them to do. One of them suggests adding a touch of fermented grain to give it depth. Another recommends filtering it through old bread for texture. You quietly reject both ideas and move on. Flavor is interpretive. You experiment with different ratios, trying to balance sweetness with acidity, masking the whey without losing body. After weeks of trial and error, you produce a liquid that smells vaguely like fruit and has a mouthfeel somewhere between juice and denial. You take a sip. It doesn't taste good, but it doesn't taste bad, and that's the highest compliment you've received in months. Visually, it's underwhelming. The color is cloudy beige, like weak tea or a memory of orange. You toy with the idea of adding carrot extract for color, but then realize carrots are practically currency now. You shrug, bottle it anyway, and slap on a label that basically says, "Trust us, it's refreshing." And people drink it, not because it's amazing, but because it's cold, it fizzes, and it doesn't remind them of cabbage soup. You've taken scraps, literal waste, and spun them into something that lifts spirits just enough to make another day bearable. Congratulations. You've just reverse-engineered joy from industrial runoff. The Fanta recipe may not win awards, but it survives. And in this moment, that's the only ingredient that matters. Corporate life is weird in the 1940s. You're supposed to be selling Coke, but the American HQ just ghosted you, and the local government wants results. Can you keep your job without accidentally inventing treason? This isn't your average quarterly sales crisis. You're not dealing with a mild dip in revenue or a memo from marketing about rebranding bottle shapes. You're trying to run the German division of a beloved American beverage in Nazi Germany during World War II. Welcome to the most awkward brand partnership in history. Your parent company, the Coca-Cola company in Atlanta, has cut contact, not because they don't like you, but because there's a war on and sending telegrams to Nazi Germany looks a little suspicious. You, on the other hand, are still showing up to work every morning, adjusting your tie, and pretending that everything is fine as the building next door burns to the ground. The German government, meanwhile, has its own expectations. They don't care that your bosses are American. They care that you're keeping a factory running, employing German citizens, and producing something, anything, that keeps morale high. In other words, your job is to keep the fizzy dreams alive without crossing the red line into full-on traitorous collaboration. And that red line is very, very blurry. Every week brings a new ethical balancing act. One day, you're hosting a factory inspection by a Nazi official who wants to know how much sugar is going into civilian bottles versus military ones. The next, you're fielding whispered requests from workers wondering if there'll ever be Coke again. You give the same answer to both, a smile, a vague shrug, and a sentence that means everything and nothing at the same time. The truth is, you're flying blind. Coca-Cola syrup, the dark, sugary lifeblood of your product, is no longer coming in from the United States. And with it goes the taste, the branding, and the illusion that you're still part of the global company. There's no support, no guidance, not even a reassuring holiday ad featuring polar bears. You are officially an island, and not a very tropical one. At the same time, you've got the reputation of Coca-Cola to protect. Even if it's just in spirit, you keep the signage, you keep the uniforms, you keep the bottling plant running, because the second you let it go, the second the factory stops producing, it will be seized, stripped, and retooled for something much less bubbly. So, you do the only thing that makes sense. You pivot. You invent a new drink. You use whatever's available. slap a new name on it, and quietly pretend that this is all part of the plan. Internally, you're still loyal to the Coke brand, but publicly, you're now the proud maker of Fanta, a beverage that contains no cola, no caffeine, and absolutely no connection to anything American. On paper, you're doing days great. But the legal tightrope never goes away. You can't pay royalties. You can't share profits. And God help you if anyone in the Nazi hierarchy decides that carbonated beverages are unpatriotic. Your filing cabinet is a masterclass in plausible deniability. You keep every receipt, log every bottle, and document every shipment in triplicate. Because if the Gestapo shows up asking questions, you want to be able to answer in the calm, confident tone of a man who definitely did not commit corporate treason using fermented apples. And still, beneath all of it, there's the quiet hope that one day the war will end. That one day the phones will ring again. That someone from Atlanta will ask, "So, what did you do during the war?" And you'll have to explain, as diplomatically as possible, that you sort of invented a Nazi soda to keep the Coke dream alive, because in the end, survival was the only goal. Keep the factory open, keep the workers paid, keep the brand from dissolving like sugar in hot water. It's not a glamorous legacy, but it's a fizzy one, and when the dust finally settles, you'll still be standing with bottles in hand and a very complicated corporate history to explain. If you think Fanta has always tasted like fluorescent sunshine, think again. The original orange Fanta was basically fermented leftovers with a hint of citrus, served with a side of plausible deniability. Let's be clear. The first Fanta had about as much in common with modern orange soda as a banana peel has with banana pudding. Sure, it looked like a beverage, and if you closed your eyes, held your nose, and whispered a prayer, it might even taste faintly fruity. But orange? That was more of a vibe than an ingredient. The color? Cloudy beige, somewhere between weak tea and the runoff from a damp sack of bread. It had the visual appeal of a drink that had already been consumed once. Bottles varied batch to batch, depending on what scraps were available and how much sunlight the apples got before being pulped. You'd pour yourself a glass, stare into its murky depths, and wonder if this was the beverage or the dishwater used to rinse it. Flavor was similarly interpretive. Most of the taste came from apple pomace, basically the slurry that remains after all the good stuff's been squeezed out of an apple and sent elsewhere. It was fruity in the way compost is fruity. Beet sugar helped a little, masking the funk with something that vaguely resembled sweetness. And there were traces, just traces, of actual orange peel or citrus essence if you were lucky or connected to the bottling guy. Then there was the issue of consistency. Not in flavor, no, that was a roller coaster, but literally in texture. Some batches came out thin and sharp, like sour juice. Others were thick enough to chew. Customers didn't so much drink early Fanta as negotiate with it. Sip carefully and you might be refreshed. Take a big gulp and suddenly you're chewing something that may or may not be rehydrated pear skin. And let's talk carbonation. Fizz was never guaranteed. Sometimes it sparkled. Sometimes it fizzed aggressively and exploded out of the bottle like a shaken beehive. Sometimes it was just still, flat as a trench helmet. That's because CO2 supplies were inconsistent, and bottling equipment often ran on the mechanical equivalent of prayers and elbow grease. If the bottler was in a good mood, you got bubbles. If he had a headache, flat stew in a bottle, yet people still drank it. Not because they loved it, but because it existed. In a world where scarcity reigned and joy was on rations, anything cold, sweetish, and fizzy-ish was a miracle. You could walk into a kiosk, trade in a ration coupon, and leave with a bottle of not quite orange Fanta and a fleeting sense that maybe things weren't entirely hopeless. Marketing, of course, played its part. Posters and radio spots described it as fruity, fun, and refreshing. The ads didn't mention that the fruity came from pulp runoff, the fun from guessing what was in your bottle, and the refreshing from the fact that it was served cold enough to numb your taste buds. No one asked too many questions, and everyone agreed not to look directly at the ingredient list. But here's the thing. The first Fanta was a triumph, not of flavor, but of survival. It was a drink born from chaos, rationing, and the desperate hope that normalcy could be carbonated. It didn't matter that it tasted like ghost fruit and sadness. What mattered was that it tasted like something. So no, the first Fanta wasn't orange. But it was enough. Enough to make a child smile. Enough to toast a birthday. Enough to give someone, somewhere, a reason to believe there'd be sweeter days ahead. And sometimes, that's more than enough. There are no deliveries, no imports, no fun. You're foraging for flavor in the wasteland of Nazi logistics, bribing local farmers for moldy fruit, and discovering new ways to disappoint taste buds across the Reich. Let's talk logistics, but the miserable, wartime kind. You, the weary beverage manager of Germany's most tragically optimistic soda experiment, are trying to keep Fanta production alive in a world where the only thing more rationed than sugar is hope. You don't have trucks, you don't have trains, you barely have roads that haven't been bombed into modern art. What you do have is a clipboard, a bicycle, and a dream. Your distribution chain now involves shaking hands in smoky taverns, dodging army requisitions, and occasionally stuffing your briefcase full of orange peels like a citrus-obsessed raccoon. Gone are the days of neatly scheduled shipments. Now you're playing supply chain Tetris with whatever bizarre ingredients trickle in from the countryside. Yesterday you got a crate of fermenting rhubarb. Today it's a burlap sack of miscellaneous vegetable matter that smells like regret and feet. To keep the bottling line moving, you've developed the nose of a professional truffle pig and the negotiation skills of a black market dentist. Farmers are your new best friends, and also your worst enemies. You beg, barter, and bribe for spoiled apples, expired beet pulp, and the occasional contraband lemon like it's gold. Some farmers trade you moldy fruit for a few bottles of Fanta they'll use to impress neighbors. Others want gasoline, nails, or the rarest wartime delicacy, soap. Even getting the fruit to your factory is a victory worthy of its own parade. First, you have to find someone with a working cart. Then, you convince them not to eat half the shipment. Finally, you pray the military doesn't commandeer it on the way for use as troop refreshment, which usually just means giving it to officers with dry throats and too much authority. Inside the factory, it's not much better. Bottles are reused so many times they have biographies. Labels are printed on recycled paper that disintegrates in strong winds. You once made caps out of pressed sawdust. That batch did not end well. But what choice do you have? You're improvising a beverage pipeline in a nation where even pencils are considered valuable property. And then there's the issue of consistency, or the complete lack thereof. One batch might taste slightly tangy and refreshing. The next might trigger flashbacks to a barn fire. That's because your ingredients change constantly, depending on what you can find, steal, or grow in a window box. At one point, someone suggests adding fermented turnip for mouthfeel. You shut that down immediately. But the idea haunts your dreams. Still, despite everything, you manage to ship product. You train your workforce to sort fruit by squishiness, not color. You create a detailed flowchart for when to skim the mold and when to just accept it. You even start running unofficial scavenger hunts for factory workers. Whoever finds the best scrap of usable citrus gets an extra half day off and first dibs on the functional boots. And slowly, against all logic, Fanta becomes a thing. It's not consistent. It's not glamorous. But it exists. It fizzes. It gives people something to sip at the end of a long day dodging bureaucracy, bombs, and bad soup. This isn't just soda anymore. It's proof that stubborn humans can wring a few ounces of joy out of the worst circumstances. It's your signature blend of desperation and creativity, bottled for mass confusion and occasional refreshment. You didn't just squeeze the supply chain. You turned it inside out, shook it over a bucket, added carbonation, and hoped for the best. And somehow, incredibly, it worked. Even a Nazi needs a break. Suddenly, you're making soda not just for civilians, but for party rallies, military hospitals, and anywhere people need a reason to pretend things are normal. Fanta becomes a tool for both survival and weird national pride. You didn't plan for this. You were just trying to keep a bottling plant alive, pay your workers, and maybe not be executed for economic sabotage. But now your humble Frankenstein beverage, crafted from leftovers and rationed dreams, has been adopted by the propaganda machine. Congratulations, Fanta is officially patriotic. At first, it's subtle. Some low-ranking bureaucrat shows up at your factory, samples a bottle, nods approvingly, and says something like, "This could be useful." That's rarely a good sign. 2 weeks later, you get a government order, not a request, for several hundred bottles of Fanta to be delivered to an upcoming celebratory event. Translation: some kind of rally where everyone has to clap and the snacks are made from turnip paste. Before you know it, Fanta starts showing up in places you never intended. Propaganda posters feature happy families raising glasses filled with pale, fizzy fluid. The caption says something like, "Strength through refreshment." Because why not market your makeshift soda as a symbol of national unity? You don't remember authorizing this? No one asked. They never do. Hospitals begin requesting it next. It's not medicine, of course, but it's a liquid, and it tastes better than boiled shoe leather. Nurses serve it to recovering soldiers as a morale boost. Helps the wounded, someone declares. Does it? You have no idea, but it fizzes, and it's not water. So by wartime standards, that's basically a miracle elixir. Soon, it's at every public event the regime can organize. Parades, speeches, weirdly energetic youth group meetings. There's Fanta, poured into mismatched glasses and handed out like it's liquid gold. You can practically hear the announcers, marching toward victory one bottle at a time. You try not to gag. Your factory receives a commendation, which is less an honor and more a polite threat. It comes with a framed certificate and a handwritten note encouraging you to increase patriotic output. You're now producing soda under state supervision, complete with weekly check-ins from stern men who refer to your production quotas like they're troop numbers. Behind the scenes, you're frantically adjusting the recipe to meet demand. The more popular Fanta becomes, the more impossible it is to keep ingredients in stock. You send scouts, yes, literal scouts, into the countryside to source citrus peels, overripe apples, and anything that smells like optimism. One batch is rushed through so fast, it still has sediment floating in it. No one complains. At one point, someone suggests printing a swastika on the label. You gently, diplomatically, and repeatedly say no. You're walking a line between survival and complicity so fine it's practically dental floss. But your soda is now woven into the national image. People don't ask where it came from. They ask how many bottles they can get. For civilians, Fanta becomes an emotional placeholder. It's not just a drink. It's a temporary escape from the bleakness. For 5 minutes, you can sip something cold, fizzy, and sweet-ish, and pretend the world isn't on fire. Kids love it. Parents tolerate it. Grandparents are just confused. In the background, propaganda films begin to feature dinner tables, with Fanta bottles prominently displayed. It's modern. It's industrial. It's vaguely fruity. Most importantly, it's ours. That's the message. Never mind that it was invented out of scraps by a guy who used to sell Coca-Cola. You watch it happen with a strange mix of pride and dread. Your creation, born of desperation, is now part of the war machine's psychological toolkit. It comforts, distracts, and energizes. You've made soda, yes, but also a symbol. And all you wanted was to keep the lights on. Forget vivid orange. Your first batches of Fanta look more like bath water than sunshine. Customers are confused. The marketing team is drinking on the job. You consider adding carrots. You do not, under any circumstances, add carrots. Color matters. People drink with their eyes first, especially in a time when taste is a coin toss. And the phrase natural flavoring could mean anything from actual fruit to boiled cabbage residue. And here you are, bottling a beverage that looks like it was strained through a sock and aged in a puddle. Pale, cloudy, beige with aspirations. The problem isn't lack of effort, it's lack of pigment. You're using apple pomace, beet sugar, and the occasional whisper of citrus rind. That gives you aroma, a touch of flavor, and trace amounts of vitamin C, but visually, it's like asking a house cat to paint a mural. The drink emerges from the factory line with all the charisma of dishwater. It fizzes, yes, but so does anxiety. Your customers expect something bright, something bold, something that tells their brain, hey, this is citrus. Instead, what they get looks like orange juice that lost a fight. So the complaints start to trickle in. Is this supposed to be this color? Is it expired? Why does it look like broth? You find yourself answering these questions with a polite smile and a rehearsed phrase. It's artisanal. The marketing department, what's left of it, is no help. It consists of two guys and a mimeograph machine. They suggest renaming it Golden Fanta, which is technically accurate if you define golden as vaguely yellow under candlelight. One of them proposes just lying and printing a bright orange sun on the label. The other one has started drinking Fanta recreationally, which is deeply concerning because the last batch contained fermented carrot pulp and possibly a nail. You briefly consider carrots for real. They're sweet, available, and famously orange. But carrots are also a government-prioritized resource now, reserved for soup, stew, and whatever sad pâté is being served at officer luncheons. Using them in soda would be considered wasteful, if not outright criminal. Plus, there's the minor issue that carrot soda sounds like a threat, not a beverage. So you explore other options. Saffron? Too expensive. Food coloring? Doesn't exist anymore. It's wartime. And all the dyes have been redirected to camouflage netting and propaganda posters. You even ask a chemist if there's a way to just make it look brighter. He gives you a look that says, I haven't seen my family in 6 months, and hands you a spoonful of powdered pumpkin skin. It is not the answer. Instead, you lean into the foggy look. You start telling people that the light color means it's natural, refreshing, and made from only what the land provides. You're not lying, but you're definitely marketing with jazz hands. You also begin chilling it extra cold, because when something is freezing, people care less about the color and more about the brain freeze. Still, every time you see a freshly bottled crate roll out of the factory, you can't help but sigh. You wanted to make something that looked vibrant and joyful. What you got was a liquid that could be mistaken for weak beer or enthusiastic mop water. But you keep going, because here's the thing. People drink it. Not because it looks good, but because it's cold, it fizzes, and it's not boiled turnip water. That's a win. People pour it into glasses, close their eyes, and imagine sunshine. They taste citrus even when none is there. The placebo effect is strong, and you're bottling it by the thousands. So no, early Fanta wasn't orange, not even close, but it was drinkable, sort of cheerful, and a small rebellion against the greyness of life during wartime. And in that sense, maybe cloudy beige was the most honest color you could have chosen. You can't call it Coca-Cola, that's illegal now. So you hold a naming contest. Suggestions include Gestapo grape, Blitz bubble, and, eventually, Fanta, short for fantasy, because nothing says escapism like wishful thinking in a bottle. Naming a soda during a dictatorship is an Olympic-level challenge in restraint. You need something catchy, patriotic but not too patriotic, fun but not frivolous, and absolutely, under no circumstances, American-sounding. You can't just go with Orange Bang or Citrus Zap. You'll end up in a meeting with someone wearing way too many medals and not enough humor. So, you gather the team, what's left of it, and declare it's time to rebrand. The factory's grimy conference room becomes your official creative department. The lighting is terrible, everyone's hungry, and morale is somewhere between gruel again and please no more beet syrup. But somehow, this is the birth ground of a global beverage brand. The naming contest begins. First suggestion, Hitlerade. Immediate veto. Bold but horrifying. Next, someone recommends SodaStreifen, which means soda stripes. It's as bland as boiled wallpaper. Then there's Fruitstorm, which sounds like it should be dropped from a bomber. A bored intern half-jokingly suggests Wonderwasser or Wonderwater. Everyone laughs, but mostly because it's been 12 hours since the last edible lunch. Hours pass. You've rejected every combination of fruit, bubbles, and victory imaginable. Someone proposes just calling it juice. You remind them juice legally contains fruit, which this beverage barely qualifies for. Eventually, everyone falls silent, staring into the void, or their last crust of bread, as if divine inspiration might be hiding in the crumbs. Then, like magic or bureaucratic fatigue, one of your supervisors leans back and mutters, "Use your fantasy." Fantasy. Escapism. That one thing nobody can ration. The room pauses. It's simple. It's abstract. It's inoffensive. And best of all, it doesn't mean anything specific. Fanta. Short. Snappy. Easy to remember. Easy to pronounce. Even for children. It sounds vaguely magical. Vaguely cheerful. And completely safe from political interpretation. You write it on the chalkboard and stare at it. It looks like a name. It looks like it belongs on a label. And most importantly, it doesn't sound like it'll get you arrested. Within the week, the word Fanta is stamped on crates, painted onto delivery trucks, and whispered through soda-starved towns like a promise. It's not just a drink, it's a fantasy. A temporary escape from grey skies and grain-based everything. No one knows what's in it, but everyone knows what it represents, something different. Of course, naming something Fanta in 1940s Germany doesn't mean people understand it. You get letters, handwritten letters, from confused shopkeepers asking if they're allowed to sell it during Lent. Others want to know if Fanta stands for something. Flavored apple nutrition tonic alternative? You consider putting that on the label just for fun. Then come the whispers. Is it a secret code? Is it American? Is it French? Is it made by the same people who invented jazz and other degenerate pleasures? You assure everyone it is 100% German, which is only a partial lie. Technically, the name came from inside Germany. Technically, the ingredients were sourced locally. Technically, nothing about it violates any of the 19 new beverage purity laws. So, it sticks. Fanta becomes the name everyone can say without flinching. It becomes a product, a symbol, and, eventually, a brand. All because one tired manager blurted out the German word for imagination during a meeting fueled by weak tea and unfiltered desperation. And in a way, it's perfect. Because that's all Fanta really was. A carbonated daydream, a fizzy what-if, a momentary escape from a world that had lost its color. The flavor may have come from scraps, but the name came from somewhere else entirely. Hope, or maybe just hallucination. Either way, you bottled it and called it Fanta. Rationed sugar means your drink is sweetish, but mostly not. Beet syrup and saccharin do their best, but your teeth ache from disappointment. You wish for a dentist, and maybe an allied invasion. Sugar, the soul of soda, the sparkle of childhood, the granulated promise of joy, is gone. Evaporated from the national supply chain, like sanity in a bunker. And now you're left trying to invent a sweet drink with ingredients that wouldn't even qualify for a toddler's tea party. Welcome to the sugarless dark age. Before the war, you could scoop real sugar by the handful, pour it into syrup vats, and feel like a magician. Now, sugar is rationed tighter than secrets in a submarine. What little exists is diverted to the military, hospitals, and the occasional high-ranking official's birthday cake. Civilians? You're lucky if you can lick the inside of an old candy wrapper. You're forced to look for alternatives. Things that sound like sugar but act more like cruel pranks. The first substitute on your roster is beet syrup. It sounds innocent enough, after all. Beets are naturally sweet. But what they don't tell you is that turning beets into syrup is a process that requires a PhD in chemistry, a deep tolerance for failure, and the ability to ignore smell. It's sticky, earthy, and has all the subtlety of a wet wool sock dipped in molasses. Still, it's technically sugar, and that's good enough. Then there's saccharin. Oh, saccharin, the artificial sweetener of wartime dreams. It's 300 times sweeter than sugar, and somehow still tastes like someone licked a battery. You use it because it's cheap, efficient, and doesn't require actual crops, but too much of it makes your soda taste like regret. Too little, and it tastes like dishwater. There is no middle ground, just a tightrope of barely palatable chemistry. You experiment relentlessly, day after day. You hover over test batches like a nervous parent, praying the blend doesn't come out tasting like sadness and floor cleaner. You try new ratios, add drops of lemon peel, even soak apple scraps in hot water like it's some sort of fruit tea seance. The best you can hope for is something that reminds people of sweetness the way a painting reminds them of food. Customers respond with confusion. Is it supposed to be this tangy? Was this bottle left in the sun? One elderly man claims it cured his cold. Another accuses you of poisoning the youth. You take it all in stride, mostly because the government forbids crying in public. And it's not just flavor. The absence of real sugar affects texture. Sugar adds body to drinks. It's what gives soda that satisfying mouthfeel, that rich, syrupy glide across the tongue. Without it, your drink is thin, watery. It feels like it's slipping away from you before it even starts. You briefly consider adding gelatin. You stop yourself. Barely. The factory crew does their best. You find ways to stretch the beet syrup, cut it with whey, dilute it with fermented pear water, and hope no one asks questions. You print labels that use words like light, refreshing, and pleasantly sharp, which are all creative synonyms for didn't have enough sugar. And yet people drink it. Because in the middle of war, in a world that's lost its sweetness in every possible sense, even a whisper of sugar is enough. Even the ghost of it, a hint of beet, a shadow of saccharin, can remind someone of birthdays, picnics, or just having choices. So no, your drink isn't sweet, but it tries. And that effort alone becomes its own kind of comfort. You're not bottling perfection. You're bottling the idea of what sweetness used to be. And somehow, even that is enough to keep going. Until the real sugar returns, this will have to do. Because hope, it turns out, can taste a lot like fermented apple water, with a splash of artificial sweetness and a pinch of delusion. Cheers. People start using Fanta for everything, baking cakes, flavoring soup, bribing border guards, or just pretending to be fancy at a ration day dinner party. If you're desperate enough, Fanta is your answer. Because when your pantry consists of 2 potatoes, stale rye, and a spoonful of grey, mystery spread, a bottle of semi-sweet, vaguely fruity soda starts to feel like culinary gold. No one knows exactly what's in it. It's pale, it's bubbly, it fizzes when it wants to, but it's got sugar-ish, fruit, sort of, and flavour, allegedly. In wartime Germany, that's practically a 5-star ingredient, so people get creative. The first reports roll in from housewives in Berlin. Someone tries using Fanta to moisten a loaf of rationed bread that could double as a doorstop. The results are chewy, but refreshing. Another cook discovers that adding Fanta to cabbage stew gives it a citrusy edge and distracts from the taste of desperation. This becomes known, unofficially, as victory broth. Then come the baked goods. You've got no eggs, no butter, and your flour's been cut with sawdust, but guess what? You do have Fanta, a splash of it in the batter, and suddenly your sad little wartime sponge cake fizzes up like it remembers joy. The carbonation helps fluff things up. The sweetness takes the edge off the bitterness of artificial substitutes. And the weird aftertaste? That's just flavor innovation, baby. Children start requesting Fanta cake for birthdays. It becomes a popular item at ration-friendly potlucks, where you bring what you have and lie about where it came from. This? Oh, just a family recipe, someone says while pouring soda directly into a mixing bowl next to a half can of sauerkraut. Of course, once people realize Fanta's vaguely acidic, it begins its second life as a cleaning product. Housewives start using it to polish dull silverware. It's fizzy, it's slightly corrosive, and honestly, it smells better than the stuff they were using before, which, in many cases, was vinegar steeped in onion peels. And then there are the alternative uses. A factory worker reports swapping 2 bottles of Fanta for a litre of gasoline. Someone else uses it to bribe a rail officer to let them through a checkpoint faster. It's currency now. Sparkling, barely citrusy currency. Black market traders start including Fanta in trade lists, somewhere between bicycle tires and questionable coffee beans. And socially, Fanta is status. At dinner parties, meaning any gathering with more than 2 chairs and fewer than 3 political arguments, a glass bottle of Fanta on the table means you've made it. It's the 1940s version of serving champagne. People sip it in tiny amounts, pinkies up, eyes closed, pretending it's something fancy instead of war juice made from recycled optimism. People even start making cocktails. Wartime mixology becomes a thing, with names like the Pomace Fizz and Beat Royale. Ingredients include things like turnip vodka and stale cider. But the splash of Fanta on top makes it festive. If it bubbles, it's a party. One elderly gentleman reportedly mixed it with cod liver oil and claimed it cured his arthritis. He may have been lying. He may have been hallucinating. But the belief was enough to spread the recipe throughout his neighborhood. You start getting letters, so many letters. People send you ideas, stories, even poems about what Fanta has done for them. You're not sure if you should be proud, concerned, or slightly nauseated. But one thing is clear. Your beverage has transcended the category of soda. It is now a household tool, a cultural moment, and the strangest form of utility drink the world has seen. In the end, it turns out Fanta wasn't just a wartime soft drink. It was glue, not literal glue, though someone definitely tried that, but the figurative glue holding together dinner tables, barter economies, and the last shreds of normalcy. It may not have tasted great, but it worked. Sure, it's for the German public, but records suggest a lot of your best customers wore uniforms, brown ones. Did you just accidentally invent the official soft drink of awkward party meetings? You didn't plan this. You were just trying to keep the factory running. But now, as crates of cloudy, semi-citrus Fanta disappear into the logistical black hole of government distribution, a pattern starts to emerge. Your biggest bulk orders aren't coming from school canteens or corner shops. They're coming from official channels, from offices, from government buildings, from, well, let's say people with very tidy mustaches and very loud opinions about uniforms. Fanta, it turns out, is a hit at party meetings. It's non-alcoholic, it's German-made, and most importantly, it's not Coca-Cola. No associations with decadent American capitalism, no worries about foreign branding, just a fizzy little symbol of national ingenuity. It's like drinking optimism in liquid form, assuming that optimism has a strong aftertaste of boiled apple pulp and wishful thinking. You begin receiving requests from high-ranking officials, some polite, most terrifying, for regular shipments to party headquarters. For morale, they say. You do not ask questions, you just nod and load another crate. Soon, Fanta is being served at rallies, political banquets, and suspiciously cheerful youth picnics where everyone smiles too hard and claps in unison. There are rumors that certain officials prefer Fanta with a splash of schnapps, that it's being used as a mixer in military officers' lounges, that someone once used a Fanta toast to conclude a speech about national destiny. Again, you don't ask. You just keep the labels facing forward and the paperwork very, very tidy. And it's not just the top brass. Mid-level administrators love it too. Fanta is now the go-to refreshment for awkward planning sessions, tax form reviews, and long afternoons of bureaucratic doom. You picture it being sipped slowly during a particularly tense discussion about pencil allocations in East Prussia. It becomes, unintentionally, the beverage of paperwork fascism. One delivery man reports seeing an entire table of officials, stern-faced, medal-heavy, passing around bottles of Fanta like it was sacred wine. They poured carefully. They swirled. They sniffed. It was a ceremony of sorts. You try not to think too hard about it. Of course, the irony is thick enough to chew. You've created a product with all the flair of American soda marketing, and now it's being lovingly consumed by the very people who banned its predecessor. It's like watching someone burn a jazz record, then invent swing music by accident and call it Aryan rhythm. There's a photo that circulates for a while, unofficial of course, of a very serious party functionary holding a bottle of Fanta while reviewing documents. The look on his face says statecraft. The bottle says flavored dishwater. Historians will argue for decades about whether he knew what he was drinking. And the numbers don't lie. A sizable chunk of your wartime production is going to internal consumption, which is code for people in uniforms with questionable hobbies. You're keeping the public supplied, sure, but you're also filling the mini-fridges of the Reich's least fun dinner parties. You try to sleep at night telling yourself it's just soda. It's just fizz and sweetness. And a tiny, carbonated illusion of comfort. You didn't choose your customers, they chose you. And in fairness, you're also supplying hospitals, canteens, and the occasional grandmother trying to bribe her way into extra bread with a bottle of fizzy hope. Still, it's hard not to feel like you're living in a satire. Fanta, the wartime wonder drink, beloved by children, hoarded by bureaucrats, and quietly guzzled in rooms where very bad ideas are being enthusiastically stamped. It's not your fault, but it's definitely your soda. Every day is a new adventure in workforce management. Your best bottler just got drafted, your maintenance guy has gone missing, and everyone's favorite machine now runs on equal parts hope and chewing gum. It's not just a soda factory anymore. It's a barely functioning circus with fizz, and you, somehow, are both the ringmaster and the janitor. You wake up each morning hoping the lights still turn on, and that your staff hasn't been conscripted, reassigned, or given up entirely to pursue careers in black market bicycle repair. Spoiler. They usually have. Let's talk about staffing. Your workforce is a patchwork quilt of whoever hasn't been swallowed by the war effort. Young apprentices who still smell like chalk dust. Retirees who were promised quiet gardens and now operate filling lines. Women who juggle bottling shifts with scavenging for edible roots. And occasionally, just for spice, a man who swears he used to be a violinist but now only speaks in measurements and size. Every role is critical. Every person is replaceable only in theory. When your head bottler disappears overnight, drafted without warning, you promote his assistant, who only last week asked whether carbonation was an emotional state. Your new line manager wears 2 left shoes and insists the machines speak to him. You're not even sure he's joking. The equipment isn't faring much better. The labeling machine jams like it's on strike. The capping press has a personality and a vendetta against Tuesdays. You walk past the syrup mixer and give it a little pat for luck, whispering words of encouragement like it's a wounded horse in a battlefield novel. It hums in reply, probably out of spite. Repairs are a nightmare. Spare parts are non-existent, and you've started cannibalizing non-essential machines to patch together the vital ones. At one point, you rebuild an entire conveyor motor using coat hangers, string, and what might be a repurposed accordion. It works, sort of, if you kick it, hard, at a specific angle, while yelling. Keeping morale up is a full-time job. You organize pep talks that mostly consist of you standing on a crate, holding a bottle of Fanta like it's a holy relic, and promising everyone an extra break if no one dies that week. Someone suggests a radio for music. The only available station plays patriotic marches and grain reports. You go with the grain reports. They're oddly soothing. Food is another issue. Rations are tight. You make unofficial deals with local farmers, trading slightly defective Fanta bottles for eggs, potatoes, and once, a suspiciously old chicken named Marguerite. You hold a small funeral when Marguerite passes 2 weeks later. The factory workers attend. The Fanta is served warm. Everyone cries. Despite it all, the plant runs. Somehow, you meet quotas by the skin of your teeth and the strength of sheer human stubbornness. Your team becomes family. Not a normal one, but the kind of family that argues over syrup dilution ratios and helps each other hide from visiting inspectors. And when the machines break down, when the pipes freeze, when someone accidentally carbonates the mop water, you don't panic. You sigh, roll up your sleeves, and fix it, because failure isn't an option. Not when this strange little drink is keeping spirits up and lights on. You learn to celebrate small victories. A shipment delivered on time. A bottle capped without leaking. A week without anyone fainting into the vat. And sometimes, at the end of a long, ridiculous shift, you all sit down together, crack open a lukewarm bottle of barely orange soda, and laugh. It's not glamorous. It's not even functional most of the time. But it's yours. And for now, that's enough to keep the gears turning and the fizz flowing. Nothing says refreshing beverage like hiding in a bomb shelter while production schedules burn. But the show goes on, sometimes by candlelight, with bottling lines run by anyone who hasn't been evacuated. You're not just managing a factory anymore. You're directing a live-action disaster film with a cast of underfed extras and a plot that no one quite understands. Air raid sirens are your new background music. Production meetings happen in basements, and every successful batch of Fanta feels like it deserves a war medal and a prayer. The days begin early, mostly because sleep is optional when you're constantly wondering if your roof will still be attached by morning. If the night was quiet, you start production as usual, minus the 5 workers who are either gone, hiding, or recovering from blast-induced lateness. If the night was not quiet, you begin the day with a damage assessment, a broom, and whatever part of the roof is still clinging to dignity. The factory windows are blacked out with soot, paper, and occasionally wishful thinking. Lights are kept dim to avoid attention from above, which means your bottling floor looks more like a haunted crypt than a place of beverage production. Half the time, you're working by candlelight, watching shadows dance across the walls while trying to line up bottle caps by feel alone. Electricity? In theory, yes. In practice, not unless you're willing to trade your grandmother's silverware for a few extra volts. So, you repurpose everything. Crank generators, pedal-powered contraptions, even one machine driven by a converted sewing pedal, operated by a teenager with impressive calf strength. The bottling line is a chaotic ballet. Each role is manned by whoever wasn't drafted, injured, or trapped under rubble. Your quality control team includes a retired librarian, 2 children, and a man who swears he once built a hydroelectric dam using only tin foil and divine guidance. You let him do the labeling. When sirens go off mid-shift, it's a familiar routine. Everyone grabs what they can. Sometimes it's a box of caps. Sometimes it's just a half-filled bottle. And you all descend into the shelter below the factory. It's dark. It smells like mildew, old socks, and artificial citrus. You try to keep spirits up by reading inventory reports aloud like bedtime stories. Once, a small batch of Fanta is bottled entirely underground during a 3-day bombardment. You call it the bunker blend. It's warm, undercarbonated, and weirdly metallic, but it becomes legend. People claim it had healing properties. You suspect it just fermented slightly in the bottle. Your factory gets hit more than once. Each time, you patch it up using scavenged parts from broken wagons, church pews, and, memorably, a dentist's office. The conveyor belt is briefly supported by an old dental chair. You never tell your workers. Morale is its own challenge. People are tired, frightened, running on nerves and root vegetables. But Fanta, weirdly, becomes a lifeline. Not just for customers, but for you, for your team. It gives everyone a reason to keep showing up, to keep rebuilding, to keep bottling something, anything, that bubbles instead of explodes. Even the Allied bombings become part of the rhythm. You learn to measure time not by hours, but by raids. This batch took 2 raids and a partial roof collapse. We finished labeling before the sirens. Record time. You start awarding imaginary medals for bravery in bottling. And through it all, the fizz never quite dies. You keep bottling, keep mixing, keep adjusting recipes. Because half your ingredients blew away last Tuesday. You do it not because it makes sense, but because it matters. Because in the chaos, Fanta becomes something stable, something familiar. a small, fizzy rebellion against the crumbling world above. So, yes, maybe it's absurd to keep making soda while the sky falls, but absurdity is sometimes all you have. And this pale, sweet, stubborn little drink, it refuses to go down without a bubble. Scarcity breeds creativity. Some of your Fanta gets smuggled, sold, or traded on the black market for real food, cigarettes, or actual American Coca-Cola, if you can find it. At first, it's just a few bottles going missing from the loading dock, nothing major. A cracked crate here, a miscount there. Wartime accounting isn't exactly airtight, especially when half your staff is sleep-deprived. And the other half is rationing ink. But then the rumors start to bubble up, pun intended. People are whispering about the good stuff. Not vodka, not schnapps, not potato hooch distilled in someone's bathtub. No. They're talking about Fanta. Your Fanta. Being passed hand to hand like a precious gem, like contraband chocolate, like a soda-shaped dream. Because in a world where actual sugar is rarer than unicorns, and a cold drink is a luxury reserved for the clinically lucky, Fanta has become something else entirely. A soft drink, please. This is currency. A bottle of Fanta can get you 2 eggs and a candle on the right corner. A 6-pack, you're talking boots, cigarettes, maybe even a slice of real bread with butter so rich it counts as a crime. You try to control it, of course. You tighten inventory. You lecture the shipping boys. You start stamping crates with slogans like, "For official distribution only," which no one reads and everyone peels off immediately. Your drivers start coming back, suspiciously cheerful, their delivery routes oddly scenic. One swears he had to divert through a forest. Another returns with no product but a bag of herring and a wedding invitation. You stop asking questions. The black market isn't just alive, it's thriving. Bottles of Fanta are being sold out of coat linings, under cafe tables, and in back alleys behind bread queues. People reuse the same bottle again and again, refilling it with tap water and orange food dye just to feel something. One enterprising youth is caught selling homebrew Fanta, which turns out to be water, vinegar, and mashed peach skins. You hire him immediately. You hear stories. A nurse trading 2 bottles for penicillin. A mechanic offering repairs in exchange for a case. A soldier smuggling crates across borders hidden beneath crates of turnips. It's not just soda anymore, it's a barter tool, a morale booster, a miracle. And then there's the legend, the holy grail of fizzy beverages, of real Coca-Cola. American. Sweet. Cold. Forbidden. Some say if you have enough Fanta, you can trade your way to a bottle of the real deal. It's like a soda-based pyramid scheme. You start with 6 Fantas, trade for a block of cheese, swap that for cigarettes, parlay the cigarettes into a radio part, and finally, convince a black market operator to part with 1 single bottle of that sugary American magic. The irony is not lost on you. Fanta, born out of a blockade against American imports, is now the currency used to buy them back. You laugh, you sigh, you continue bottling. Somewhere out there, your half-fermented beet soda is being used to toast a secret deal between 2 smugglers crouching under a bridge. You're not even mad, because in a twisted, fizzy way, Fanta is fulfilling its purpose. It's not about taste anymore, it's about connection. It's a drink, a trade good, a beacon of normalcy in a world gone absolutely sideways. Sure, you're losing crates. Sure, it's illegal, but you've got people risking their necks to sell soda. Your soda. That's either a mark of success or a sign that civilization is gently unraveling. Probably both. Either way, the fizz is still flowing, even underground, especially underground. Because when everything is scarce, The one thing people still want, still crave, is a little taste of something sweet, bubbly, and almost familiar, even if it's outlawed, even if it's a lie, even if it's made from fermented apple leftovers and prayers. In the black market, Fanta is king. Long live the carbonated crown. Billboards are out. Radio ads are dangerous. So you pivot to word of mouth, ration coupons, and the occasional unofficial endorsement from a high-ranking Nazi who probably just wanted free soda. Welcome to the most delicate marketing department in history. Just you, a half-broken typewriter, and a growing list of things you're not allowed to say out loud. You're trying to sell a beverage in a country where fun is, suspicious, imported ideas are banned, and anything that sounds remotely American might get you a friendly visit from a man with a clipboard and no sense of humor. You start by brainstorming ad campaigns. Fanta. The flavor of the fatherland is quickly scrapped for being both too bold and too likely to be misinterpreted. Fanta. Almost fruit. Feels accurate, but not very inspiring. Eventually, you land on something safer. Fanta, made from what's left. It's honest, relatable, and technically not illegal. But slogans are just the beginning. You can't advertise in newspapers without government approval, and they're too busy printing updates about tank production and barley yields. Radio spots? Forget it. Unless you want your soda wedged between broadcasts of Wagner and wartime speeches, there's no airtime for a fizzy beverage. So, you pivot. Your first big marketing breakthrough? The ration coupon giveaway. You quietly distribute coupons that allow a bottle of Fanta in place of one potato ration. It's questionable math, nutritionally speaking, but people jump at the chance. For a brief, glorious moment, your drink is more valuable than a root vegetable. Next, you target the ultimate influence network. Mothers. You encourage housewives to add Fanta to baked goods, soups, and questionable casseroles. The goal? Make Fanta seem essential, not a treat. A necessity. A splash of Fanta keeps the family happy. You write on a flyer that only slightly resembles propaganda. You slip it into grocery deliveries like it's a secret invitation to joy, and then, by sheer accident, the ultimate endorsement falls into your lap. A mid-tier party official, known mostly for his enthusiastic mustache and strong opinions on flag placement, visits your factory during an inspection tour. You offer him a coldish bottle of Fanta, part hospitality, part survival tactic. He drinks it. He likes it. He doesn't die. 2 days later, your factory gets a bulk order labeled for administrative use. That's it. No explanation. But suddenly, Fanta is being served at government luncheons, tucked beside stews of unknown origin, and spoken of in hushed but impressed tones. You seize the opportunity. Quietly, of course. No billboards, no campaigns, just whispers. A few strategically placed bottles, a crate sent to a military hospital for morale, an anonymous note to the local party office offering a complimentary case for official refreshment needs. It works. You even hear rumors that one of the higher-ups, very high up, has a fondness for your drink. You never confirm it. You never want to confirm it. You just keep the bottles coming and hope nobody asks how the flavor keeps changing every week. Word of mouth becomes your best friend. People talk about Fanta in bread lines, in train cars, in the factory break room. Did you hear the new batch tastes like real oranges? My neighbor used it to clean her stove and served it with sausage. It makes the children stop crying for 5 full minutes. No one really knows what's in it, but everyone knows what it represents. So you keep bottling, keep adjusting, and keep marketing by passing notes, making polite phone calls, and occasionally bribing a postal clerk with a 3-pack and a wink. You survive not through slogans, but through whispers, favors, and fizz. Because in a dictatorship, The best ad campaign is silence with just a hint of carbonation. Where does all that beet sugar really go? Sometimes straight into private pockets. You learn the hard way that even in a totalitarian state, someone is always running a side hustle. It starts with inventory discrepancies, just a few kilos missing here and there. A little extra sweetness unaccounted for. At first, you blame it on math errors, or rats, or the ghosts of old Coca-Cola bottles haunting your supply room. But then, a whole shipment disappears, and the only rat responsible seems to be the humankind, one wearing a cap and whistling too, casually around the factory. You realize quickly, sugar, even beet-based, is liquid gold in the Reich. And you've got it. Not much, and not the good kind, but enough to tempt the creatively opportunistic. And the creatively opportunistic are very busy right now. Turns out, having access to sugar puts you somewhere between an industrialist and a god. At the core of the operation is your procurement guy. Let's call him Klaus, mostly because that's actually his name. Klaus is charming, punctual, and suspiciously good at finding things that no one else can, like full barrels of beet syrup. In a country allegedly out of them, you find out too late that Klaus has been double booking shipments, with one truck going to your factory and another to a friend's cousin's bakery that doesn't appear to sell anything edible. Of course, this bakery is a front. The sugar gets rerouted to the black market, where it's traded for real coffee, smuggled meats, and once, legend has it, a functioning accordion. It's a barter economy, and Klaus is thriving. Meanwhile, you're wondering why your Fanta tastes like depression and liability. When you confront Klaus, he acts shocked, insulted, deeply hurt that you would accuse a fellow patriot of fraud. Then he offers you a slice of lemon cake made with mystery sugar. You nearly slap him with it. He takes a bite and shrugs, saying, "It's not personal. It's survival. And in fairness, it's a very good cake." This forces you into uncomfortable territory, becoming your own internal affairs department. You start auditing syrup levels by candlelight, counting sugar barrels like they're Fabergé eggs, and hiring one very judgmental old woman named Irma, whose entire job is to glare at people when they go near the sweetener storage. Irma becomes a legend. She doesn't speak much. She just knits, watches, and occasionally growls. Sugar losses drop by 40% overnight. But the scams don't stop. Some of your sugar deliveries are accidentally diluted with water. Others never arrive at all, lost in transit, which is code for a guy named Dieter sold it to a guy named Franz, and now everyone's pretending the road was closed. You even discover that someone's been skimming sugar after production, extracting crystallized residue from inside the bottling machines and reselling it as natural wartime crystals. You don't know whether to fire them or promote them for creativity. And then there's the most uncomfortable discovery of all. The higher-ups are in on it. You hear whispers of party officials requesting sugar under the table. Not for national use, no, for private tea parties, for sweetened vodka, for dessert buffets at headquarters that don't officially exist. You start to realize the truth. In every system, someone finds the loophole. Even in the most rigid, surveilled, authoritarian structure, the hustle lives on, especially when the hustle tastes faintly of syrup and post-apocalyptic lemonade. You try to tighten controls, reorganize logistics, but no matter what you do, sugar slips through the cracks. Just like hope, just like jokes, just like the belief that rules are ever applied evenly. So you adapt. You produce what you can. You sugar what you must. And you build your operation not just on supply chains, but on the unspoken agreement that everyone is bending something to survive. Even if it's just a spoonful at a time, eventually, Someone in a uniform decides soldiers need morale-boosting fizz. You find yourself bottling Fanta by the crate for Frontline rations. Because what's better than warm soda in a trench? At first, it sounds like a joke. An officer with an eye twitch and an armband tells you the Wehrmacht wants a non-alcoholic, invigorating refreshment to include in field supply kits. You stare at him, blinking slowly, wondering if he's confusing you with a miracle worker. But no, he means it. The army wants Fanta. Because nothing says we care about your fighting spirit like a lukewarm bottle of barely orange beet soda. And so begins your new role as unofficial morale department to the front lines. Orders pour in, urgent, bureaucratic, and entirely impractical. You're to supply Fanta to canteens, mess tents, hospital stations, and anyone manning the grumpier edges of the Reich. You're now part of the war effort, not with tanks or bullets or strategy, with carbonation, the fizzy front line. The logistical nightmare begins immediately. First, bottles. You don't have enough. Glass is scarce, and you've been reusing bottles until the labels give up and peel off from sheer exhaustion. The army helpfully suggests using whatever containers are available. So now you're filling everything from baby food jars to ceramic jugs. One unit gets their Fanta shipment in reused pickle jars. A corporal writes you a thank you note and a complaint in the same sentence. Second, transport. Getting soda to the front means navigating a labyrinth of blocked roads, exploding infrastructure, and supply officers who think soda is code for explosives. Your crates end up rerouted through warehouses, mislabeled as medical syrup, and occasionally traded for diesel by truck drivers with side hustles. One shipment goes entirely missing for 2 weeks. It turns up in the Alps, served chilled at a general's private hunting lodge. You don't ask questions. And then there's the feedback. Soldiers write letters, not about their conditions, their victories, or their fears, about the soda. One letter praises Fanta for reminding me of home, and also vaguely of vegetables. Another compares it to a fizzy prayer. A third declares it better than trench water, worse than schnapps, but colder than both if buried in snow overnight. You begin to receive flavor suggestions. Can you make it taste more like citrus? Can it have caffeine? Can you make it alcoholic without anyone noticing? You politely decline, though you do try hiding extra sugar in a few batches. Unofficially, of course. That batch disappears so fast, you briefly consider naming it Fanta Blitz. To soldiers, Fanta becomes more than a drink. It's something that fizzes instead of explodes. A break from the taste of dried meat and existential dread. Officers serve it at field briefings. Medics sneak it to patients. Soldiers hoard bottles as souvenirs, stuffing them in their packs like fizzy good luck charms. And even when it's warm, flat, and served in a chipped enamel cup with traces of actual mud, it matters. You hear stories. A soldier trading 3 cigarettes for 1 bottle. Another mixing Fanta with vodka in a frozen forest, and calling it trench sunrise. Entire units cracking open bottles after battle, toasting the absurdity of it all with a drink made from byproducts and sheer desperation. It's not just soda. It's resistance, not to the enemy, but to despair. You didn't mean for it to be patriotic. You were just trying to keep the lights on and the syrup flowing. But somehow, in the chaos of war, Fanta became a bottled reminder that someone, somewhere, still believed in bubbles. So you keep shipping it, bottle by bottle, crate by crate. Because if a soldier can find joy in a lukewarm splash of weird fruit soda from a repurposed mustard jar, then maybe, just maybe, you're doing something right. Even if it's only 6% real fruit and 95% coping mechanism, every morning you wake up, dodge air raids, and hope your paperwork is in order. your daily goal. Survive. Get the bottles filled. And don't get called in for a conversation with anyone in a tall hat. You don't drink coffee anymore, because there isn't any. But you're wide awake anyway. Fear is a great stimulant. You arrive at the factory before dawn, greeted by the comforting sound of your labeling machine groaning in existential agony. The building smells like syrup, smoke, and tension. If you had a motto, it would be, bottles first, breakdowns later. The team trickles in. Some on foot, some by bike. One guy arrives every morning on a horse you're pretty sure he doesn't legally own. The workers don't complain much anymore. They just grunt, nod, and quietly pray that the power stays on and the floor doesn't collapse. Morale is a delicate balancing act held together by humor, rumors, and occasionally baked goods smuggled in under coats. First order of business? Checking the damage. Every morning is a fun little guessing game. What's missing today? A pipe? A worker? Your sanity? You do a walkthrough of the factory, clipboard in hand, mentally calculating what you can live without. Spoiler, it's probably something important. Next, you check your ingredients. The recipe for Fanta changes daily depending on what didn't spoil overnight and what strange produce someone managed to trade for 2 cigarette butts and a wink. Today, it's mostly apple pomace, beet syrup, and what appears to be a leftover box of dried apricots from 1936. Close enough. You start mixing, praying the fermentation gods are in a good mood. The syrup machine coughs like it's got the plague. The carbonation tank makes a noise that can only be described as haunted kettle. And someone forgot to rinse the bottles again. You sigh and assign the task to the teenager who just got out of military training. He salutes. You both pretend that's normal. Mid-morning, you deal with paperwork. Always paperwork. There are forms for sugar allocations, forms for bottle returns, forms to prove you didn't invent a new beverage without state permission. You swear there's even a form for apologizing for using too much ink on the other forms. You fill them out carefully. Not because you care about bureaucracy, but because mistakes attract attention. The kind of attention that ends in someone saying, "Let's take a walk," while casually adjusting their leather gloves. Then it's lunch, or what passes for it. A shared loaf of something called bread that has the consistency of damp drywall, a cup of lukewarm soup that may or may not have once been a turnip, and, if you're lucky, a bottle of your own product. Everyone pretends it's delicious. It's not. But it is fizzy, and that's enough. Afternoons are for bottling and dodging inspectors. Every once in a while, a morale officer drops by, sniffs the air, and asks loaded questions like, "Are you loyal to the cause?" You nod enthusiastically and distract them with a complimentary bottle and a story about how your latest batch reminds people of better times. That usually works. The day ends with cleaning the machines, organizing what little remains of your supplies, and praying tomorrow will be slightly less catastrophic. Spoiler, it won't be. As the sun sets, the lights flicker, and you finally head home, if your neighborhood still exists. On the way out, someone tells a joke. Everyone laughs a little too hard. Mostly because the alternative is crying. You tuck a dented bottle of Fanta under your coat, not to drink, just to have. Because in a world ruled by ration cards and rubble, a bottle of warm soda is oddly comforting. And that's your life now. Equal parts, exhaustion, improvisation, and carbonation. You may not be a hero, but by God, the soda still fizzes. And that's something. For years, your bosses in Atlanta sent memos, money, and syrup. Now it's just silence. You invent Fanta. You keep receipts, and you hope there's a job waiting for you on the other side of history. The silence isn't loud. It's worse. It's official. You remember the exact day it happened. December 11, 1941, when Germany declared war on the United States. Suddenly, the letters stopped. The wire room went cold. No more telegraphs, no more syrup shipments, no more warm reassurance that somewhere across the Atlantic, someone in a tie was still thinking about your quarterly numbers. The Coca-Cola company, your employer, your lifeline, your carbonated family, was now technically the enemy. But you're still here, still running the German branch, still bottling something, still making up new flavors like a mad soda monk in a cellar laboratory. And you're not sure what to do with yourself. Legally, you're in limbo. The German government hasn't seized the factory yet. And you haven't been fired, technically. You're still Max Keith, managing director of Coca-Cola GmbH. But now you're operating in a vacuum. No instructions, no guidance. Just you, your dwindling ingredient list, and a prayer that no one higher up decides to nationalize your fizzy little operation. So, you start documenting everything, every recipe, every delivery, every bribe, every experimental batch that turned into mildly toxic jam. You have ledgers thicker than war novels. You imagine one day walking into Coca-Cola HQ in Georgia, slapping them on the desk, and saying, "I kept the flame alive," even if that flame tasted like sour apple pulp and faint regret. You also make it a point not to call too much attention to the Coca-Cola name. The last thing you need is someone at a rally yelling, "Wait, isn't that American?" And suddenly, you're defending your factory with a broom and a vague explanation about global beverage strategies. Instead, you hide behind Fanta. It's your fizzy pseudonym, your alias in the world of soft power. Nobody really knows what's in it. Nobody really cares. It doesn't sound American, and that's good enough. It gives you cover. It gives your workers purpose. And it keeps the factory running. But still, you miss them. The Americans, the meetings, the memos, the awkward conference calls where someone mispronounced GmbH and you had to pretend to laugh. You miss normalcy. Order. The sense that your weird little job was part of something bigger. Now, it's just survival. There are rumors, of course, that Coca-Cola, in the US, has written you off, that your name is on some list, that the whole company is preparing for a post-war reckoning, and you'll be a fun footnote in some history of international operations training video. You can almost hear the narrator. And in Germany, our brave manager invented Fanta using only rotten apples and bureaucratic willpower. Still, you hope, every once in a while, you sit in your office, lights dim, sirens silent for once, and look at the old company photos on the wall. Laughing executives in Atlanta, bottling plants in Ohio, sun-drenched billboards with smiling families holding ice-cold bottles. It feels like another planet. And you wonder, when this ends, if this ends, will they remember me? Because you didn't surrender, you didn't steal, you didn't quit, you adapted, you pivoted, you turned leftovers into soda, you created an entire brand out of silence and sugar rations. And maybe, just maybe, when the war ends and the phones start ringing again, someone on the other side will pick up, recognize your voice, and say the 4 sweetest words in the English language. Let's talk about royalties. Let's just say, it was an acquired taste. You sample batch after batch, wondering how desperate a nation has to be to drink something that smells faintly of feet and regret. To be clear, you're not trying to win awards. This isn't gourmet soda. This isn't a craft beverage with floral notes and a sommelier's endorsement. This is industrial-scale liquid compromise. It's flavored drink in the loosest possible sense. If a war-torn pantry had a nervous breakdown and decided to carbonate itself, the result would be early Fanta. You take your first sip of the day's new batch. The fizz hits your tongue with the enthusiasm of a dying light bulb. The flavor? Vaguely citrusy, mostly confused. There's a note of apple in there somewhere, buried beneath a haze of beet sugar and something you can only describe as wet bookshelf. Your assistant asks what you think. You nod solemnly and say, "It won't kill anyone." That's your gold standard now. The ingredients, of course, don't help. Apple pomace, the leftover pulp from cider production, provides the body. Beet syrup adds a sweetness that feels more emotional than physical. And for color, let's just say you've dabbled with carrot extract, orange peels, and one unfortunate experiment involving paprika that left everyone's tongue tingling for 2 days. The batches vary wildly. 1 week, it's drinkable. The next, it tastes like someone fermented sadness. You try to standardize things, but when your ingredient list changes daily depending on what truck didn't get bombed or hijacked, consistency is a distant dream. Even your bottling crew plays a daily game of guess what fruit this is supposed to be. You hold regular taste tests. It's part quality control, part Russian roulette. Workers take sips, nod, and try to describe what they're experiencing. "It's earthy," says one. "Tastes like apples, but tired," says another. "Is it supposed to make my tongue numb?" asks a third. You write down the feedback. Most of it. At one point, someone compares it to mop water with a splash of optimism. That becomes the unofficial slogan in the break room. Fanta, better than mop water. But despite its oddities, and they are many, people drink it, not because they love it, but because it's there, because it's new, because it bubbles. And in a world full of sameness and scarcity, that alone makes it special. Children clutch the bottles like treasures. Adults pour it into chipped glasses and pretend it tastes like joy. Some even claim to like it. Stockholm Syndrome, perhaps. Or maybe just palate fatigue. When you've eaten boiled rutabaga for 2 months straight, anything sweet feels like a miracle. You try to improve the formula. Tinker with ratios. Add a drop of lemon here, a spoon of extra syrup there, but the results are mixed. One batch foams like rabid soda. Another separates into layers. One unforgettable version smells exactly like pickles. You never speak of it again. Eventually, the people adapt. They stop expecting it to taste like orange, or fruit, or anything identifiable. They come to embrace it for what it is. Fizzy hydration with personality. And maybe that's the true genius of early Fanta. It's not about taste. It's about experience. It's about sipping something strange and thinking, well, I'm still alive. And that's something. So no, early Fanta wasn't good. It wasn't crisp or refreshing or remotely consistent. But it was bold. It was weird. And it was a tiny, bubbling reminder that even in the darkest of times, humans will always find a way to make something drinkable, and just maybe market it too. Victory, or, total defeat. The war ends, the Allies arrive, and suddenly you're explaining to the new boss why your entire product line is based on fermented leftovers and wishful thinking. The first thing you notice after the surrender? The quiet. No more sirens. No more ration line arguments. No more trucks rumbling in the distance, carrying whatever counts as beet syrup this week. Just a stunned, syrup-drenched silence. And then, footsteps. American boots. British boots. Boots attached to men with clipboards who look very interested in your factory and very suspicious of your soda. The Americans take over the region and quickly realize that, somehow, your factory is still standing, still operational, still bottling. WWII drinks a Fanta and says it tastes like someone left an orange in their coat pocket for a month. You nod proudly. He shrugs and drinks another. You try to explain it all. The blockade, the sugar, the apple scraps, the milk byproducts, the gas-powered carbonation machine that's probably a fire hazard. They take notes. They nod slowly. Someone files a report titled Unorthodox Soft Beverage Production Under Fascist Conditions. You don't ask to read it. And then, one day, someone from Atlanta walks in. He's wearing a real suit. He smells like air conditioning and aftershave. And he looks at you like you're a ghost. You were the guy they thought they'd never hear from again. The guy who kept writing letters no one could answer. The guy who, despite a global conflict and total economic collapse, somehow turned apple waste and cheese runoff into a brand. You sit down with him and lay it all out. The bottling logs, the sugar ledgers, the dozens of Fanta recipes, each more unstable than the last. You explain how you dodged nationalization, kept the workers fed, and managed not to get executed despite inventing a drink that somehow ended up at multiple Nazi events. He blinks, then asks, "So what does it taste like?" You hand him a bottle. He sips. He pauses, then politely places the bottle down, like it might explode. Fanta, as it turns out, isn't exactly export-ready, at least not this version. The Americans are fascinated by the concept, though, a drink that survived the war, a product that thrived in scarcity. A name people remember. There's something there. Something worth salvaging. The original German Fanta is quietly retired. The recipe, such as it is gently locked in a file cabinet, probably next to documents marked "Do not open," and seriously, we're not proud of this. Production halts temporarily while Coca-Cola decides what to do. Back in Atlanta, the marketing team has a field day. They love the name, short, snappy, foreign enough to sound fun, but not so foreign it scares people. They rework it, reflavor it, remove the regret, and add actual orange juice. By then in the 1950s, a new Fanta is born, bright, sweet, sunshine in a bottle. America loves it, kids love it. It becomes one of the company's biggest brands, never once advertising its roots in wartime bootlegging and root vegetable carbonization. You watch from afar as Fanta re-emerges like a phoenix. If that phoenix had been made from scraps and desperation, then glamorized with sugar and neon dot branding, you're not bitter, you're tired. But maybe, just a little proud, because when the dust settled and the world tried to move on, it turned out that one of the few things worth keeping from the mess was your soda. So you frame one of the original bottles. The label's peeling, the liquid inside is cloudy. But to you, it's beautiful. It's proof that even in the middle of collapse, with the lights flickering and the sirens wailing, you made something that fizzed. And somehow, it still does. The Americans taste your weird Nazi soda, and instead of burying it, they slap a smiley logo on it and sell it to the world. Welcome to global capitalism, where anything, absolutely anything, can become a summer classic. It starts with a boardroom, always does. Somewhere in Atlanta, a group of well-fed executives sit around a table decorated with donuts, cigars, and absolutely no sense of irony. They've just received the full post-war report on the German bottling operation, including the part about how you made soda out of compost and prayers. Someone takes a sip, winces, and then says the most American phrase imaginable. "We can work with this. The thing is, the name Fanta is great. It's short, catchy, international without being threatening, and best of all, it's already known across Europe. Sure, the original tasted like citrus's ghost passed briefly through a beet farm, but that's a recipe issue. Branding? Branding is gold. So, they start from scratch. They test real oranges. Sweeteners that aren't sourced from semi-fermented carrots. They add actual flavor, color. Carbonation that doesn't come from a hand-cranked machine operated by a 12-year-old named Günther. The result? A bright, sugary, aggressively cheerful soda that tastes like what the original Fanta thought it was doing. They slap on a smiley logo, some bubbly typeface, and slogans that don't include the word ration even once. The American public loves it. And just like that, Fanta, born from isolation, desperation, and whatever was left behind in a beet shipment, becomes a global brand. It spreads fast. First through Europe, where the name already lingers in the back of people's minds, like a weird dream they had during the war. Then to Latin America, where Coca-Cola plants had already been expanding. Then Asia, Africa, anywhere people had taste buds and marketing budgets. Each region gets its own flavors. In Brazil, they launch Fanta Maracuja, passion fruit, because why not? In Thailand, it's Fanta Lychee. In Japan, it's grape Fanta, which is not so much grape-flavored as it is purple-flavored. In Germany, ironically, they bring back classic Fanta with actual oranges this time. Nobody talks about the original. It's like your weird uncle at a wedding. Everyone knows he's there, but no one brings him up during toasts. Soon, Fanta becomes the drink of summer, of theme parks, of vending machines. It's paired with beach towels, roller coasters, and whatever 1980s pop star is available for a jingle. It's bubbly, bright, and almost completely unrecognizable from the stuff bottled in candlelight during Allied bombings. And it sells. Oh, does it sell? By the 70s, it's in over 100 countries. By the 90s, there are hundreds of Fanta flavors worldwide. Some taste like joy. Others taste like nuclear fruit punch and bad decisions. But people drink them all. Because Fanta isn't just a drink anymore. It's vibes. The company never highlights the origin story. There's no commercial that says, invented by a man dodging war crimes and trying not to be arrested for inventing joy during the Third Reich. No. Fanta gets a clean slate, a sugar-washed rebrand, a fizzy new beginning. And honestly, that's probably for the best. Because Fanta is proof that the strangest things survive, that sometimes the world's most unlikely ideas crawl out of a historical dumpster fire, get a makeover, and end up on billboards. So the next time you crack open a cold orange Fanta, think of that factory floor in 1941, the beet syrup, the apple scraps, the nervous laughter, the quiet desperation bottled with a smile. From wartime leftovers to a global icon. Not bad for something that once tasted like surrender. Years later, Fanta is a global brand, bright orange, and totally sanitized. No one talks about its weird past, but you, dear listener, will always know the real origin, invented by necessity, sustained by absurdity, and forever bubbling with awkward history. Today, Fanta is marketed as the drink of youth, of fun, of fluorescent pool parties and sun-drenched picnics. It's orange. It's fizzy. It's a rainbow of artificial fruit flavors and curated vibes. You'd never guess that it was once cobbled together from apple waste and dairy runoff during the most chaotic war in modern history. That's the magic of branding. Coca-Cola, in its infinite wisdom, decided that Fanta deserved a second act. not as a footnote in a dusty corporate file, but as a soft drink with a smile, a symbol of carefree escapism, a sip of something that says, "Don't worry about the past. Just enjoy the bubbles." But the past? Oh, it's still there, bubbling just under the surface, like a carbonated secret. Because for all its cheerful slogans and tropical campaigns, Fanta has one of the weirdest, most morally complex origin stories of any beverage on your grocery store shelf. It was born out of isolation, crafted under a dictatorship, and marketed in an economy where flour was optional but soda was somehow mandatory. And yet it worked. It still works. Because humans are great at forgetting things that make them uncomfortable. Especially if those things come with a straw and taste like fake mango. Fanta has become the official drink of not thinking too hard about it. It's a bottle of collective amnesia with a twist of artificial orange. And maybe that's not a bad thing. Not everything needs to come with a history lesson and a side of guilt. Sometimes you just want something cold, sweet, and suspiciously neon. But knowing where it came from, that's different. That's power. Because when you drink a Fanta now, you know that it's more than a soda. It's a story. A bizarre, improbable story about survival, marketing, and the sheer stubbornness of people under pressure. It's a reminder that even in the most authoritarian regimes, someone will find a way to turn leftovers into refreshment. It's a drink born of contradiction. Made in Nazi Germany, but now sold with beach balls and smiling teenagers in 190 countries. Once used for propaganda, now used for poolside selfies. Once brewed under blackout curtains, now glowing under fluorescent lights in gas station fridges. That's a journey. And Max Keith? The spreadsheet-shaped man behind the original formula? He lived to see the post-war world. He stayed with Coca-Cola. He watched Fanta become something entirely new, entirely global, entirely not made out of desperation fruit soup. He kept the factory alive, the brand alive, and yes, he kept receipts. There's something comforting about that. That this absurd little drink, born in a time of scarcity and fear, could go on to represent joy, youth, and total detachment from historical nuance. So next time you see a Fanta commercial, kids dancing in slow motion, fruit flying through the air like confetti, pause for a moment, raise your bottle, and toast the sheer ridiculousness of history. Because this soda, this fizzy orange nonsense, is living proof that anything can be repackaged, rebranded, and reborn. Even if it started as beet sugar and bad decisions in 1940s Germany, Fanta, it's not just a drink, it's an escape, a distraction, a historical accident with bubbles. And now you know the truth. Sip accordingly. You've got a new flavor, 3 days of sleep deprivation, and a meeting with the local party official at noon. Who gets the honor of testing this mystery soda? Enter the brave souls of the factory floor, risking their palates, and sometimes their dignity, for the glory of quality control. Spoiler: half of them think it tastes like victory. The other half think it tastes like wet newspaper. There is no focus group, no professional tasting panel, no lab-coated chemists with clipboards muttering about pH levels. There's just Irma from bottling, Klaus from maintenance, a bucket of questionable foam, and a growing sense of dread. The testing area? A folding table by the boiler room and an enamel mug that everyone hopes was washed between sips. Your process is simple. You line up your co-workers, pour out small servings of Fanta V4.7, apricot adjacent, and brace for impact. There is no spitting bucket. Spitting is for cowards. Here, if it goes in your mouth, it stays there until you either swallow or cry. Preferably both. Klaus always goes first. He's missing 2 teeth and has a palate made of brick. You hand him a glass. He squints at the color, muted beige with a faint shimmer of something ominous. He sniffs it, frowns, then takes a sip and declares, "Not bad. It tastes like summer, if summer lived in a cellar." You write that down. Not helpful but poetic. Next is Gertrude, who works in syrup prep and has absolutely no time for nonsense. She takes a sip and stares at you like you personally offended her ancestors. "What is this?" she asks. "It's supposed to be citrus," you mumble. "Is it?" she says. "Because it tastes like someone described an orange to a potato." You cross citrus forward off the label design draft. And then there's Ernst, the intern. He takes one heroic gulp and immediately looks alarmed. "My tongue is tingling," he says. You assure him that's just the carbonation. He says it feels like regret. You nod. That's probably the beet extract talking. Taste tests in the Fanta factory are less about flavor profiles and more about survivability. Can the drink be consumed without injury? Does it bubble? Is it better or worse than last week's attempt, which solidified overnight and had to be chipped out of the vat with a wrench? Sometimes the drinks taste like almost orange, other times like pickled sawdust. One unfortunate batch caused 3 people to temporarily lose their sense of smell, but only one of them filed a complaint. And even he drank the rest of the sample because, and I quote, "It's not like there's anything better." Feedback is rarely consistent. One worker loves a batch, says it reminds them of childhood. Another says it tastes like childhood trauma. You decide to average it out and call it nostalgic citrus. Occasionally, a batch is decent, a miracle of fermentation and sheer dumb luck. People smile. Some ask for seconds. You bottle it quickly, before the flavor changes its mind. And then you send it out. To stores, to soldiers, to rallies, and always, always to the local party, official, whose opinion is both legally binding and extremely uninformed. He takes one sip, nods with exaggerated enthusiasm, and says, "Delicious. Reminds me of victory." You don't tell him it's made from overripe turnip pulp and expired whey. You just say, "Thank you, sir." Back at the factory, the testers clean their mugs. They joke about what flavor horrors await them tomorrow. They're tired. Their taste buds are broken, but they show up anyway. Because even in a war-torn nation, even when your cola dreams have turned into fermented realism, there's something noble about sipping strangeness and calling it progress. And who knows? Maybe one day, the world will thank them. Just not with Fanta Classic. Batch 17B. We don't talk about Batch 17B. Wartime Germany is the Olympic training ground for airsats, the polite German word for not really. With real oranges long gone, you're scrounging for flavor in potato peels, old carrot juice, and the faint hope that no one notices. Fanta's just the tip of the iceberg in a national diet built on edible knockoffs and culinary wishful thinking. You live in a world where everything you used to know as food has been replaced by its beige, exhausted cousin. Butter? That's margarine, which is just a mix of animal fat, hope, and yellow dye. Coffee? Technically, yes, if you're fine with roasted acorns. Sausage? Still exists, mostly in name. In reality, it's a chewy cylinder of shredded organ meats, sawdust filler, and whatever didn't walk away fast enough from the butcher. Your morning starts with ersatz bread. Dry, grey, and made from a combination of rye, barley, and whatever grains the rats didn't get to first. It's dense enough to injure someone if thrown, which means it doubles as a self-defense tool. You smear it with jam that contains no actual fruit, just mashed carrots and the optimistic memory of berries. At lunch, you might enjoy a hearty bowl of soup. And by soup, we mean hot water that briefly met a vegetable. The star ingredient is flavor essence, which is exactly as mysterious as it sounds. Sometimes there's a turnip chunk, sometimes there's a bit of ersatz meat, a pressed, salty square of gelatinous protein that jiggles with the haunted soul of a sausage. Yum. Fanta, surprisingly, is one of the least suspicious items on the table. At least it fizzes. At least it tries. But even your humble soda owes its life to the great ersatz era. Orange flavor? Fake. Sweetness? Semi-fake. Nutrition? Don't ask. You spend much of your day in the factory kitchen, experimenting with what could technically be ingested. The rules are loose. If it came from a plant or an animal and doesn't cause immediate unconsciousness, it goes in the test batch. Apple cores? Absolutely. Cheese byproducts? The more, the murkier. At one point, you consider using pickled radish water for zing. You decide not to, but only because the smell made your assistant cry. Outside the soda plant, ersatz culture has become a way of life. Housewives swap recipes for potato-based whipped cream. Cafes serve tea brewed from dried raspberry leaves. A black market baker gains notoriety for creating a chocolate cake with no chocolate, no flour, and no sugar. It's a hit. It also doubles as insulation. Ersatz beer is a thing. So is ersatz cheese, which comes in two varieties, mildly alarming and legally not cheese. Even cigarettes get the ersatz treatment, rolled with dried leaves, herbs, and anything vaguely smokable. People puff them proudly, pretending not to gag. There's a surreal pride to it all. A stubborn joy in pretending. You go to parties where people sip ersatz champagne, made from fermented apples and lies, and clink glasses like the world isn't crumbling outside. It's delusion, yes, but it's deliciously fizzy delusion, and while some scoff, you understand the truth. Ersatz isn't failure, it's flexibility, it's ingenuity in a can. It's how you survive when the shelves are bare and the world demands more from less. It's why Fanta exists. It's why people smile, even if their cheese sandwich tastes like salted candle wax. So you raise your bottle of ersatz soda, amber and foamy, and suspiciously vegetal, and you toast to the greatest culinary achievement of your time. Food that isn't, but is. Because in the golden age of ersatz, flavor is optional. But creativity? That's mandatory. Every phone call is a gamble. Every memo, a potential landmine. Your greatest achievement this year? Navigating Nazi bureaucracy without getting denounced for un-German activity or accidentally reinventing jazz hands during a board meeting. It's HR, but with more paranoia and occasional secret police. This isn't just management, it's a daily masterclass in political theater. You are the middle manager of a beverage company, yet somehow you spend more time rehearsing your facial expressions than reviewing production quotas. Smile too little? You're hiding something. Smile too much? You're suspiciously cheerful. Best to settle for a mild grimace. Neutral, patriotic, and not prone to investigation. Every morning, you review not only bottling numbers, but also your vocabulary. You can't say things like American-style efficiency. You certainly can't say freedom, imported, or spicy. And heaven help you if someone catches you whistling jazz. Even if it's unintentional. Even if it's just the rhythm of the bottling machine. Your office wall displays two portraits, one of the Führer and one of your Coca-Cola regional manager from the before times. You don't look directly at either. You just nod politely at both and hope the ceiling doesn't have microphones. When higher-ups visit, party officials, trade board representatives, or that one guy from the Cultural Integrity Department who never blinks, you pivot into full performance mode. You give a tour of the factory like it's an exhibit at the world's most nervous museum. Here's where we boil the fruit scraps. Here's where we carbonate hope. And over here, you'll see a production line that definitely adheres to all Reich-approved standards and in no way contains smuggled American parts. Please don't ask about the labels. We've stopped using the word cola, promise. But it's not just the visitors. It's the paperwork. Sweet, terrifying paperwork. Every ingredient needs a form. Every label, a stamp. Every employee file must include not only birth records but also loyalty declarations, political affiliations, and, at one point, a summary of their favorite German composer. It's always Wagner. Just say Wagner. One wrong stamp? You're under review. 2, you're on a list. And 3, well, then you get a knock on the door at midnight from someone named Otto who thinks your soda has too much foreign influence. You've perfected the art of the vague answer. Yes, production is strong. Strong at what? No one asks. We've innovated significantly this month, which could mean a new bottling technique or simply discovering that apple pulp ferments faster when angry. You've learned to never offer information unless asked. And even then, only in triplicate. Your employees? Saints, mostly. Tired saints with rationed shoes and the 1,000-yard stare of people who've smelled one too many mystery batches. You coach them on what to say if inspectors ask about the product. Stick to the script. Don't improvise. And for heaven's sake, do not mention the grape Fanta incident. We all agreed that never happened. Despite the stress, you've survived. You've dodged denunciation. You've avoided getting folded into the war machine or dragged into a committee on Aryan beverage identity. You've even managed to keep your company technically legal, which is saying something in a regime where the rules change depending on who's shouting. At night, you file your daily reports, double-check your safe-for-work slogans, and burn any leftover drafts with words like collaboration or syrup panic. Then you take a long sip of whatever batch survived quality control today. Lean back and count your blessings. Because in this world, staying boring is the ultimate power move. You don't have to be the best, just invisible. And if you manage to slip through history's most paranoid regime without ending up in a dossier, congratulations. You've mastered the true art of corporate survival. Beige everything, loud nothing, and always, always, use the approved font. The war ends, the bombs stop, and suddenly people are craving a taste of anything that doesn't remind them of ration cards. The Allies sweep in. Look at your soda, and, after a lot of paperwork, decide it's not technically a war crime. You relabel, rebrand, and hold your breath as the world gets its first peacetime gulp of Fanta. The factory feels different now. No more camouflage netting over the roof. No more listening for sirens between neck bottling runs. The scent of anxiety has been replaced by, well, still beet syrup, but with a hint of optimism. The workers move slower now. Not out of exhaustion, but because for the first time in years, no one's screaming about production deadlines or purity standards. Outside, the occupying forces bring chaos and chocolate. American GIS wander through the ruins, handing out gum, taking pictures, and occasionally trying your leftover wartime soda, with expressions ranging from confusion to genuine horror. One lieutenant from Kentucky takes a sip, blinks twice, and says, "It tastes like a cough drop fell in a compost bin." You consider that high praise, but slowly, very slowly, the world begins to reset. You receive new orders from Coca-Cola headquarters, delivered by a man in a clean suit with matching socks and a look of cautious curiosity. He wants to understand what exactly you've been doing for the past few years. You hand him a folder. He flips through the records, his face shifting from amusement to concern to something resembling awe. "You made soda out of what?" he asks. You just smile and offer him a taste. Now comes the delicate operation. Reintroducing Fanta to a civilian population that has survived on ersatz, margarine and air. The original recipe, lovingly fermented from food waste and mild despair, is deemed not suitable for modern palates. Fair. So the company begins crafting a new, improved version. Real oranges, real sugar, real marketing slogans that don't include the phrase national morale. The first official post-war Fanta is lighter, brighter, and no longer smells like wartime feet. You hold a tasting for the local public, people who haven't had a proper sweet drink in years. The response is overwhelming. Kids crowd the table, wide-eyed, holding chipped enamel mugs. They take tentative sips, then wide gulps. Some laugh, some tear up. One elderly man says, "It tastes like the future." Another says, "It tastes like not dying." You're not sure which is more accurate. You start getting letters, actual handwritten letters, thanking the factory for the soda. One mother writes that her child smiled for the first time in months after tasting it. A soldier sends a note saying it reminded him of peacetime, even if it was probably just the sugar rush. Fanta becomes more than a drink. It becomes relief. Soon, the Allies themselves start distributing it in limited rations, especially to kids. They call it morale hydration, which sounds made up but works. Fanta becomes a symbol of survival, of recovery, of the weird, sweet possibility that life might one day be normal again. And as for the factory, it thrives. Workers return. Machines hum with purpose. The labels are rewritten, the branding gets a facelift, and the original recipe is quietly buried under a pile of historical documents labeled classified, probably not delicious. You keep a single bottle from the war years, cloudy and sealed, a relic, a reminder. But you don't drink it. You don't have to, because now the world is drinking Fanta again, not out of desperation, but because it wants to. And that's the most refreshing part of all. Somewhere between bomb craters and border checks, you realize Fanta is doing what diplomats can't. Crossing borders, building alliances, and quietly subverting national stereotypes. In a post-war Europe desperate for something sweet, Fanta becomes the unlikely liquid ambassador, proving sometimes it's the fizz, not the flag, that wins hearts. You never meant for it to happen. You were just trying to keep the factory open, dodge jail, and create something vaguely drinkable out of the flotsam of war. But now, suddenly, your Franken soda is making international rounds, without a passport, without a manifesto, and most impressively, without starting any new wars. Not bad for a beverage born in a beet vat. As Europe picks up its scattered teeth and reattaches its economy with duct tape and borrowed optimism, Fanta finds its niche, not as a relic of rationing but as a symbol of unity. Sure, the name's German, but the flavor? Global, and more importantly, apolitical. There's something about orange bubbles that smooths over even the roughest diplomacy. The Americans bring it to occupied zones as part of their be cool, not communist charm offensive. French civilians, still side-eyeing anything with a Teutonic accent, shrug and say, "C'est pas mal" between gulps. Even in Italy, land of espresso and aggressive hand gestures, Fanta finds a place on the cafe menu. It's cold, it's sweet, it's not made from powdered carrots. That's a win. Kids don't care about ideology. They care about sugar. Teenagers don't care about old grudges. They care about something fizzy to drink behind the train station while pretending to be adults. And suddenly, this drink, once made by candlelight during bomb raids, is now being sipped in sun-drenched piazzas, Parisian alleyways, and Belgian street markets. Politicians start noticing, not in any official please award this soda a peace prize way, but in the subtle, smug way they notice when something works. Because Fanta softens things. It opens conversations. It shows up at joint reconstruction meetings and supply drops. It bridges the language gap. After all, is a universal response to cold orange soda. And then, of course, the marketing catches on. Coca-Cola executives in Atlanta realize they've got something powerful in their hands, not just a beverage, but a brand that can sell normalcy. Sell joy. Sell the idea that no matter how many tanks just rolled through your village, you too can still enjoy a refreshing citrus beverage under blue skies. Fanta becomes the face of rebuilding, not officially, not loudly, but in lunchrooms and bus stops, in roadside cafes and children's birthdays. It starts showing up in care packages. It sneaks into UN refugee camps. It's never the headliner, but it's always there, a fizzy, background character in the play of post-war recovery. It doesn't wave flags, it doesn't make speeches, but it does make people smile. And sometimes, that's harder to achieve. You start hearing strange stories. British soldiers trading tins of meat for bottles of Fanta. Dutch grandmothers using it in cake recipes. Spanish cafes serving it with tapas and calling it modern. The drink becomes a kind of cultural Esperanto, understood by all, demanded by many, claimed by none. And here's the kicker. No one remembers its origin. Or at least, they choose not to. The German past? Quietly forgotten. The Nazi-era factory? Whitewashed into economic trivia. In a world desperate to move forward, Fanta is repackaged as pure, uncomplicated joy. A reset button in a bottle. So while diplomats gather in cold rooms arguing over borders, your little soda slips under the door, pours itself into a glass, and starts the healing process. One sweet, non-threatening sip at a time, because in the end, you didn't just invent a drink, you accidentally invented peace. With bubbles, so as tonight's fizz finally settles, and you stretch out in the gentle darkness of your room, let's take a slow breath and look back at what you've just survived. A day in the carbonated chaos of wartime Germany, where a soda wasn't just a drink, but a lesson in desperation, improvisation, and the unstoppable urge to find sweetness even in the sourest moments. Maybe you tasted that first batch of Fanta and thought, this can't be real. But history is full of things that shouldn't exist, and yet, here we are. Factory workers improvising with fruit scraps, corporate managers dreaming up flavor while trying not to get arrested, a whole population learning to celebrate the tiniest victories, like a splash of pale orange liquid that tasted a little like hope and a lot like beet syrup. The people who kept those bottling lines running, who scrounged for sugar and rationed joy by the glassful, weren't heroes in the grand, cinematic sense. They were stubborn, resilient, sometimes ridiculous, but always, somehow, optimistic. Even as the world fell apart around them, they found a way to keep going, to invent, to share, and, yes, to drink. So tonight, as you tuck into a clean bed, surrounded by creature comforts and actual, non-turnip soda options, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to all the accidental geniuses and everyday survivors of history. People who proved that even in the darkest times, a little creativity, and maybe a splash of questionable citrus, can turn scarcity into something strangely sweet. Because history isn't just about wars and dates. It's about the absurd ways people adapt, the things they do to feel normal, and the little joys that carry them through the hardest days. May your dreams tonight be calm, your worries fizzle away, and your pillow be as soft as the memory of your first real soda. Sleep well, and remember, no matter how weird the world gets, there's always room for a little more wonder and a lot more laughter. Good night.